Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Shariah's Voice, and I've been back after a long time. बीच में काफी लंबा break आ गया था, and today I have with me Shershah Hassan. Can I call you Sher या Shershah? आप clear कर दो, and then
either is okay.
Sher. So me and Sher go back. We go back to LUMS, and since LUMS, Sher has his own startup now. And I've been following it for the last couple of years, almost एक साल से तो मैं follow कर रहा हूँ. And I wanted to get him on board and hear his story out. So Sher, आप हमें बताएं KalPay, financials, KalPay, how's that going along? What's the idea? And because for the audience, it's a BNPL startup, buy now pay later startup, one of the first in Pakistan that is also Sharia compliant. So why not you begin with your story, and then we can move on.
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much, Shariah, for having me over. It's a pleasure. And thank you so much for following our story as well. So basically, the idea of KalPay started. I'll just tell you a bit about myself. I am an accounting and finance graduate from LUMS. I was going for a financial career myself, did my CFA level 1, and then started into the fintech industry when the pandemic came in. So we're talking about early or mid 2020. That's when I was graduating from LUMS as well. So I was working on a fintech project where we were studying the local consumer financing market. We identified two big issues. A, credit was not readily available for customers. And then secondly, credit was available through informal sectors, but it was and it still is very expensive when you're talking about 200 to 300% in annualized interest rates. So we wanted to solve that problem from a very, I would say, research-based perspective. At that time, it was not something that we thought we would materialize and work on. But that's essentially where the idea of bringing a localized version of buy now, pay later came in. And I'll, of course, talk a bit more about that in detail as well. So that's where the idea of KalPay came in. I was working on that with one of our mentors. He has his own fintech now and a few other mates from LUMS. Right after we graduated around May, the pandemic was there. Everything was closed down. We did not have a farewell, convocation, or anything else. And of course, I'm sure you can relate to that.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. So that gave me quite a good amount of time to think more about KalPay. And initially, my idea was to get incubated somewhere. So I started working on it. Built the business plan and got the pitch deck ready, built the financial models and stuff, and we got incubated at Plan 9, which is Punjab government or PITB's incubation center based out of our first software technology park in Lahore. We got incubated there, and then that's when I asked my best friend, Waleed, to join me in this venture. We have now known each other for the past 8-9 years. We were in A-levels together, then we were in LUMS together as well. I'm sure you remember him.
Yeah, I remember you.
So वहाँ से फिर, I sort of shared this idea with him. He liked it. We started working on it. Prior to this, Waleed and I had already worked on a marketing studio that we built back in the first year at LUMS. We ran that for around 2 years. I then ventured into e-commerce, built my own store, ran that for a couple of years as well, and then started KalPay. So for the first 8-9 months, we were bootstrapping it. He was working for Zameen. I was working for a US-based company. I was, eventually, ironically, I was heading digital marketing at that company. So that was a big shift for me as well, from a finance-based degree to that. Waleed was working in the data department at Zameen. So during the day we were working at our jobs, and at night we were working on KalPay. So this went on till around June 21. That's when we raised the first initial investment.
Okay.
We quit our jobs. We started building the product. We started hiring a team. It was and it still actually is quite a lean team compared to majority of the startups out there. That's what we believe in. So fast forward to today, we are a buy now, pay later, or we call ourselves a lending fintech, and we are currently running two platforms. We are operating KalPay in two verticals within the space. The first one is buy now, pay later, or BNPL as we call it. In that model, we partner up with e-commerce stores. We are not operational in retail, and we basically at KalPay as a payment option as a checkout page. So, for example, if you go on All My Tech, which is a leading tech accessories platform.
So just to there's this another I've seen this platform abroad, Klarna. Is it the same thing? क्योंकि जब हम payment पे जा रहे होते हैं, so like it's like PayPal, Klarna, Visa, Mastercard. So like it's just like this कि पाकिस्तान में फिर आपको KalPay नजर आ रहा होगा when you're ordering online.
Yeah, exactly. So Klarna is actually one of the biggest buy now pay laters globally. They were the pioneers in this industry. They started very, very early, around 2005, 2006, based out of Sweden. They're at one point in time, they were actually the biggest fintech in Europe as well. So yes, yeah, the model is quite similar. So you see KalPay on the checkout page. So once you have added products to your checkout or your cart, when you at the very last stage when you're selecting the payment method, that's where you see KalPay. You select KalPay, and through us, you're able to split your payments into 3 installments. So for example, if it's something where it's 9,000 rupees, instead of paying 9,000 through your card or through cash on delivery, today you're just going to pay 3,000 rupees. The next 3,000 is paid after 30 days, and the last 3,000 paid is paid 60 days from now. So you have a total of 3 payments spread across 2 months. So it's a total of 60 days that you have. And for the customer, there's no interest, there's no fee, so you still end up paying 9,000 rupees. And given the current macroeconomic situation and how the PSP is devaluating, I think it's a really good savings option.
Yeah, and it's open to anyone in Pakistan. There's no prerequisite. There's no let's say क्या होता है like कोई credit risk क्या मतलब कोई भी जा सकता है और वो KalPay पे click करे and he can pay like in installments like how does
initially anyone aged above 18 who is a Pakistani, they can get access to our platform. But once you make a transaction and while you're making a transaction, we do have the right to reject that transaction because there are certain checks that we do. So, we're collecting data from your ID card, we're getting a lot of data against that, we're getting a credit report against the customer. Then based on our internal credit scoring mechanisms, we see if it's a good customer to lend out to or not. And we do have a slightly higher rejection rate of around 20-30%. So if 100 people try to access a platform, 20 to 30 out of them are rejected. So we do reject loans as well, because for us, it's really important to get that money back that we're lending out. So yeah, for the customer, it's super simple. You can pay through your debit or credit card. You can pay through mobile wallets. We're introducing bank transfers really soon as well. So you can use either of those methods to pay for your first installment, and that's it. We verify your details. If everything's okay, we process your order. The merchant delivers it to you according to their timeline, which is usually 1 to 3 working days. You get your product, you've just paid 1/3 of it, and the remaining you have to pay over the next 2 months.
Sahi. This sounds pretty cool, and I feel like this is still very new. I've heard about other startups. थोड़ा सा मैंने उनके बारे में सुना. I've researched online as well, but this is still very new as a concept. And I want to come on to the second part. थोड़ा सा जो मैंने सोचा हुआ था कि when it comes to raising investment or let's say raising money, there's a thing around startups कि हम LinkedIn पे देख रहे होते हैं कि आज इसने इतने पैसे raise कर लिया, आज इसने इतने पैसे raise कर लिए. But for anyone who's watching, how does that whole process work? How do you actually go about raising money? Because you've been through the process, so you would be a good candidate to tell us कि मतलब is it मतलब एक तो cloud बहुत जमा हो गया around startups कि everyone's just raising money, but there's a lot to that process, and I would like to know more about that process. कि how was your journey in like meeting investors and convincing them to invest in your startup?
Yeah, exactly. It's a proper process that you go through. Of course, there are a lot of variables in the whole process. Initially, for an early stage startup, there are like 2 to 3 important parameters that every investor is looking at. One is the idea, but that has a very low weightage, I believe. Idea की इतनी value नहीं होती. Value 2 चीजों की ज़्यादा होती है. One is the founding team or the core team. The investor is essentially at that stage or at the early stage, the investor is investing in you. They're taking a bet on the founder that he has enough clarity around the product and he has those skills and those capabilities to sort of work things around and make sure that it is going to be a success. Secondly, it's also the early traction that you're able to get. Very few startups are able to raise just based on the idea, and that is only true when the founders have a very, very solid profile, right? For example, if it's a founder who has exited a couple of times already, who built a startup, exited from it a few times, so they already have that network, they already have that profile that it's really easy for them to raise. But for the rest, you need to at least roll out an MVP. You need to start getting those early numbers, and because one of the biggest reasons for that is if something's doing good globally or in another market, that does not necessarily validate your idea or your product. Every market is different. For example, Q-commerce is a really good case in point, right? It is a good problem solver in countries which are developed, but in developing countries, there are a lot of other use cases that can be worked on, and delivering products within 10 to 15 minutes might not be the best use case. Of course, online delivery certainly has its merits, but doing that in 10 or 15 minutes, that might not be the best case. But even if you're able to execute that within the same day or within 1 or 2 hours, I think that's good enough as well. So there are different aspects to it. So initially, you're looking to get those numbers, and you want to show that traction that I've built a good customer base. They're transacting. I'm able to get revenue in, and you just want to get that MVP starting to work out. Now coming back to the whole process. I would say it also depends on the duration of that process. Also depends on how the markets are. Currently, the markets have slowed down. We're going through globally. We're going through a recession. The funding markets have dried up. They're slow. Investors looking at the political and the macro situation in Pakistan. That's not helping us either, because the investors are shying away from this market. So ideally, looking anywhere between 2 to 6 months for the whole process if you are raising a round. Initially it can be done earlier when it's with angels, but if you're talking about seed round or post seed and then institutional investors coming in, that's the time frame that you have in mind. Initially, if I was to give you sort of an ideal scenario, it's going to be you're reaching out, you're building a database of investors that you want to work with, or you're reaching out to. So it all starts off with the first initial meeting or a warm introduction. Probably an existing investor or someone within your network, they're going to introduce you to an investor. You send in your deck, your investment deck, and it starts off with the first 30-minute meeting where you're pitching your idea to them. Then if things look okay from the investor side, usually it's going to be the investment analyst who's going to be speaking to you, a fairly young guy, probably 22, 24, 26-year-old. They discuss your startup with their team. They have a follow-up meeting with you. That's when more people from that VC or that investor are gonna join in, and then you give them access to your data room. They go through all the documents that includes your financial models, your numbers. There are multiple things here, like dozens and dozens of documents that you have uploaded it, and that's where they're verifying all the data that you've shared with them. And then from the VC's point of view, they have a meeting with their IC or their investment committee. Some directly discuss their deals with their LPs as well. So once they get a confirmation from their IC, that's when they that's when they do proper detailed due diligence. So that takes around 3 to 4 weeks further, and that's when they send in the term sheet. And then it can take another 2 to 3 weeks for the funds to clear. So ideally, when you're talking to an institutional investor, it can take anywhere between 4 to 12 weeks for the whole process. Great. For you, initially starting off with building a pipeline, because you reach out to people, it takes them some time to get back to you. Not everyone you're going to reach out to will set up a meeting, but at the same time, what you're trying to do is you're trying to build up a solid enough pipeline that so how this whole thing is structured. For example, if I'm raising 1,000 rupees, just for simplicity's sake, we can use that number. So if I'm raising 1,000 rupees, I'm going to allocate that amongst different people. So it's going to be like 500 or 50% of that will go to a VC or a few VCs. 25% of that will go to angel investors, and 25 might go to angel syndicates. So and then within those, there are different allocation spots. So for example, angels typically write checks anywhere between 10 to 50,000. You allocate a minimum check that you can say that I will not accept anything below $20,000, because you don't want to overpopulate your cap table as well. And then you said that I need 10 angel investors to join my round to fill in that allocation, that 250 rupee allocation. So everyone on average will be adding in 25 rupees. So ideally for you to be able to close those 10 angels, you need to be talking to at least 100, 150 angels. That's where you start your pipeline from. And then, you're going to reach out to 150, you'll have a success rate of around 50% for the first meeting. You set that first meeting up. And then, of course, it's going to boil down to two things. A, how many of those want to work with you, and how many of those you want to work with. So one really important aspect or element throughout the whole process is for you to do that investor due diligence as well, especially when it comes to institutional investors or investors who are putting in a lot of money, because A, they're taking away a good amount of equity as well. They're probably the one who's leading the round. They're probably getting a board seat as well. So in terms of the rights that they get, that's much more than a normal angel investor. So you just really want to make sure what their reputation is. Some startup founders, they don't really want the investors to be involved in decision making at the startup. Some investors are really into that. Some local investors have that reputation that they're really into the day-to-day business and all the minor and major decision makings that come in. So that's your preference as well. And of course, there are a lot of other things that you got to look into as well. So yeah, that's essentially how
it sounds like a very, very complicated process, but thank you for breaking it down for our audience and anyone who's watching this. And secondly, there's this other question. You just mentioned Pakistan's macroeconomic outlook and political, let's say, instability and relative stability and whatever is happening around. When you meet the investor for the first time, because in my own experience, most of the investors are okay, they are of Pakistani origin, but most of them are based out of the US or somewhere from the West, and they're looking into the Pakistani markets. And let's say you're meeting investors, how do you bypass that whole fragment of thing? Yaar, Pakistan mein to ye bhi ho raha hai, ye bhi ho raha hai, ye bhi ho raha hai. You're asking for like a 6-figure amount, and why would I give you, no matter how great your startup is, लेकिन आप जिस मुल्क से ऑपरेट कर रहे हो वहां पे तो आए दिन मसले चलते रहते हैं. So how do you go around that? Because I feel like it's a huge challenge for anyone, not for the startup owner as well and for the investor as well. So this is something like I feel like more people should know, that how do our young startups, how do they bypass these challenges? Like it's a
no, certainly. Being in Pakistan is not that helpful. Although, so there are a few things to it, right? Firstly, investors do realize that Pakistan is a big opportunity. It's largely untapped. There are a lot of problems to solve it. Body population, it's 230, 240 million people we are talking about. It's one of the youngest populations. So यहाँ पे tech की जो adoption है वो बहुत तेज है, बहुत जल्दी हुई है. 4G की growth या cell phones की जो growth है, smartphones की growth है, that has been really, really quick as well. So they do see that. And of course, as a developing country, it's a developing economy. उसकी GDP भी grow कर रही है, country भी grow कर रही है. So लोगों की जो purchasing power है, that's going to grow as well. So in turn, those are some factors that are really good for any startup that's working in this space. Given that you are, of course, not just targeting a very specific niche, but क्या आपने एक ऐसा product बनाया जो masses के लिए है और उसका scale इतना बड़ा. So whenever you're talking to the investors, one thing that they are really interested in is to find out, is the market big enough? तो उनके लिए सवाल बहुत important होता है कि market का size कितना है. अगर मैं market, for example, if it's a $100 million market, मैं वो 90% भी capture कर लेता हूँ, तो 90 million की मैंने market capture किया, which might not be that big of a deal, right? लेकिन अगर ये $20 billion की market है, उसमें से मैं 2% भी कर लेता हूँ, so that's 200 million, I think. Yeah. और उसमें फिर भी there's still room for another $19.8 billion to be captured, right? तो market इतनी बड़ी है, फिर उसमें आपके competitors भी आते हैं, doesn't affect you that much. So you have big enough playground to play in. उसके बाद देखें, whenever you're talking to investors, every investor has his geographical area that they're focused into. Not everyone is going to invest in this region, and they are very open and very clear about it. They let you know, or उनकी website पे जाएं, उनसे initial बात करें, they tell you that Pakistan is out of scope for us or out of our investment mandate. लेकिन a lot of regional VCs, global VCs, of course, you have a really solid VC ecosystem in Pakistan now as well, जो बहुत active भी है. लेकिन globally or regionally भी जो VCs हैं, they include Pakistan in the MENA region. It's called MENA, Pakistan and Turkey now, पूरे region को count करते हैं. So those investors, they have an appetite for emerging markets. तो emerging market investors होते हैं, उनको पता होता है यार कि इन countries में इस तरह के मसले मसाइल आते हैं. We are not a stable economy, we are not stable politically. And whenever you talk about these emerging economies, just Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, you're even talking about Vietnam and other countries in Southeast Asia and Central Asia. Maybe there are a lot of emerging economies that you're talking about. So वहाँ पे political and even Africa. Some countries like Nigeria, Egypt are doing phenomenally well in terms of the startup ecosystem. लेकिन वहाँ पे भी issues of political instability.
ये वाले मसले हैं, बिल्कुल हैं.
So that's one of the points that they do understand. They do understand कि ये होता है. Of course, जब macros बहुत खराब हो गए, जो हमने पिछले 2-3 महीने में देखा है, currency की stability नहीं है, political scenario पे क्या चल रहा है, no one knows. And then of course हमारी थोड़ी सी लाख किस तरह से होती है कि with all of this the floods are gonna come in, या कोई zalzala आ जाता है, it wrecks further. It doesn't really help us.
Yeah, that's true.
उसकी appetite होती है. Appetite देखें, when you're talking about how much risk an investor is taking, of course they're going to price that risk accordingly. Finance में हमें जो चीज सबसे core principle बताया जाता था, the higher the risk, the higher the return. So they're directly proportional, right? जो बंदा risk ले रहा है, it's just about they're going to price it accordingly as well. So for a financier, अगर एक VC को आप financier के landscape से देखें, so they're just going to price it differently. वो अपने risk को price करेगा, and they're going to get compensated for it accordingly. And of course, in terms of an exit or a return, it's going to be massive as well. So वो चीजें, of course, एक VC उसके बारे में सोच रहा था, and of course their appetite allows them to invest in such a market.
Great. नहीं ये this is true, और मैं खुद भी इसमें काफी interested होता हूँ. That's why I want to interview more and more startup founders के, because for anyone based out of, let's say, Silicon Valley or somewhere in the UK, बड़ा आसान होता है to pitch, because they bring in like macroeconomic stability and like a powerful economy and like a high GDP. But हमारे region के जो startup founders हैं, उनके लिए एक additional challenge होता है कि उनको ये सब चीजें भी mitigate करनी होती हैं. That's I feel like it's sort of still underappreciated, क्योंकि हमारे यहाँ LinkedIn पे post तो आ जाती है, but they kind of like do not consider कि उससे पहले का जो process हुआ होगा, जब आप बहुत सारे investors से मिले होंगे, आपने बहुत जगह पे rejections face की होंगी, and बहुत जगह पे आपको कोई headway मिला होगा. So it's a very big process, and that's why I want to focus more on, let's not say Pakistan, लेकिन इस region का startup scene. Something else I wanted to ask is, okay, we have covered how your journey went through and what's your business model. Something else I wanted to cover is कि we are like couple of years down our graduation, like we graduated in 2020, अब 2022 चल रहा है. How important is networking within our own, let's say, batch, या people who were graduating from LUMS, IBH, EIK, या even abroad around that time, COVID के time पे? Does it help अभी के startup ecosystem के अंदर when you meet your former batchmates and colleagues जो इस वक्त different चीजें कर रहे होंगे? I hope everyone's doing something of their own. How does that happen? क्योंकि एक तो नेटवर्किंग आप करते हो एस्टैब्लिशमेंट, जो एस्टैब्लिश VCs हैं और जो एस्टैब्लिश मार्केट प्लेयर्स हैं, बट जो हमारी एज के लोग हैं, how does that help? Do you meet them more often? Do you see everyone just like connecting on some level?
Yeah, great point. So I often say that network is your net worth, and you realize that when you step into the industry. That's the first thing that you realize, and quite frankly, it stands true for you as well, right? A lot of people that you might be reaching out to, शायद आपके अपने batchmates हों, या we connected because we had spent a lot of time during our time at LUMS. I think LUMS हो या IPO हो या pure university हो, उस वक्त ये चीज थोड़ी ज्यादा बतानी चाहिए स्टूडेंट्स को. It's important for them to realize हम यहाँ पे groupings होती हैं, हर यूनिवर्सिटी में होती है groupings, different basis पर होती हैं, geographical उसमें होती हैं, and जो हमें पता है कि कराची के लोग होंगे, उनका अपना ग्रुप होगा, certain schools होते हैं, उनका अपने ग्रुप्स होते हैं. तो LUMS does provide you that platform कि through different courses you're interacting with a lot of different people. LUMS में वो एक कि जो बहुत अच्छी बात है कि I as a business graduate और accounting and finance graduate, मैंने law के भी कोर्स पढ़े थे, मैंने इकोनॉमिक्स से भी कोर्स पढ़े थे, मैंने पॉलिटिकल साइंस के भी कोर्स पढ़े थे, हिस्ट्री के भी पढ़े थे. सो वो जो एक डाइवर्सिटी है ना, दैट हेल्प्स यू इंटरेक्ट विद पीपल फ्रॉम डिफरेंट स्कूल्स, फ्रॉम डिफरेंट बैकग्राउंड्स. तो वो चीज़ बहुत अच्छी होती है. लेकिन फिर भी हम, ऑफ कोर्स, वो आई वुडंट ब्लेम आवरसेल्व्स और द इंस्टीट्यूशन. उस टाइम पे हम उम्र के स्टेज में होता है कि चीजें हमें इतनी सीरियसली और इतनी वो इम्पोर्टेंट लगती नहीं है। उस वक्त शुगल मस्ती मौज मेला वो हैविंग अ गुड टाइम दैट्स मोर इम्पोर्टेंट फॉर अस। लेकिन अगर हम इस चीज से फोकस करें, दिस डेफिनेटली हेल्प्स, इट सर्टेनली डज। करंटली we have a few people from our batch from LUMS जो हमारे साथ काम कर रहे हैं. We had a few people who were working with us previously. तो इनिशियली जब मैं अपने लिए co-founder से जब कल पे स्टार्ट करा था, we were 3-4 people who started working initially and it was just Walid and me. लेकिन जो हम पहले 4 लोग थे वो इसीलिए आए थे क्योंकि मेरा SSC में भी नेटवर्क था, मेरा econ वाले उसमें HSS में भी वो था, तो 4 of us got together और हमने कहा कि इस पे काम करते हैं. लेकिन eventually जो we did fall apart, लेकिन that's okay, that happens in startups. लेकिन वही है कि the good thing is LUMS में मुझे बाकी स्कूल्स का I can't say क्योंकि हर किसी का डिफरेंट एक्सपीरियंस होता है. मैं तो LUMS में तो LUMS की मैं बात कर सकता हूँ कि people are really helpful, they're very receptive. आप उनको they remember you. Most of the people either they can recall you or you can recall them.
उनको पता होता है कि this person existed like in 4 years.
तो शायद बाद 4 सालों में ना हो लेकिन सुना होगा, मिला होगा, और कुछ नहीं, तस्वीर देख के नाम देख के पहचान जाते हैं. And they're really super helpful. They'll connect you with the right people, they'll help you out in any way that they can. They're super supportive as well. So I think जब आप अपना काम कर रहे हैं या नहीं भी कर रहे हैं, if you're even in an industry, आपका इंटरेक्शन लोगों से होगा. क्योंकि if you're talking about पाकिस्तान की मार्केट इतनी बड़ी है नहीं. आप अगर स्टार्टअप्स को निकाल के बड़ी कंपनीज की बात करें तो आप देयर आर हैंडफुल ऑफ गुड कंपनीज, और वहाँ पे योगा के वहाँ पे टॉप यूनिवर्सिटीज के LUMS, IB, NAST, LSE, GK इन सबके ग्रेजुएट्स होंगे, और मेनी और सिमिलर स्टेज पे सारे आगे पीछे होंगे. सो आपका इंटरेक्शन बहुत सारे ऐसे लोगों से होगा. सो एक तो ये कि खराब किसी से ना करें.
I think that's important.
सबके साथ एक अच्छा ताल्लुक बना के रखें, क्योंकि one point sooner or later there's going to be a point in time जब आपको उन लोगों से इंटरेक्शन पड़ेगा किसी न किसी स्टेज में. तो you really don't want any grudges or personal feelings coming in between a business dealing. तो मेरा तो यही है.
I think that's very important. लोग हमारे यहाँ इस चीज के बारे में सोचते नहीं है. I think we've covered the whole idea around startup and we're close to the 50-minute mark. Something else I wanted to ask in the end was it's 2022 right now, you're 2 years into your journey, और आगे भी different चीजें कर रहे हैं. How do you see, let's say, the next 5 years Pakistan का startup ecosystem, VC ecosystem, raising money? How does all of that work? Do you see more positivity कि हाँ ये scene आगे बढ़ेगा, like because with like big startups closing down in the last 6 months, थोड़ा सा एक pessimism भी आ गया market के अंदर कि पता नहीं होगा नहीं होगा, startup survive करेंगे नहीं करेंगे. How do you see that thing happening?
Great question. देखें, I'm going to talk about the last part first. Big startups closing down ये होता है, globally भी होता है. उसके रीजंस पे हम फिर हम अगर वो एक अलग डिस्कशन है, that's going to require another 60 minutes, so I won't go into details of that. लेकिन ये चीजें स्टार्टअप इकोसिस्टम में होती हैं, सक्सेस रेट स्टार्टअप्स में कम होता है, that's for sure.
That's true.
So of course उसकी वजह से एक इन्वेस्टर्स का, कंज्यूमर्स का, इवन जो लोग काम करते हैं, जो एम्प्लॉइज, उनका भी कॉन्फिडेंस शेक हुआ. Now they want to work for more stable companies, MNCs के लिए काम करना चाहते हैं, because no one likes to be unemployed, right? That's a very painful process, not just for the people who are laid off, but I'm sure जो founders होते हैं उनके लिए भी बहुत बड़ा painful process होता है. You don't want to do that to your team, and especially people who have built this from scratch with you. Ecosystem, it has slowed down for now, for the time being, and that's just because how the global markets are acting. A lot of big investors, a lot of big LPs, they've lost a lot of money, which है crypto में था या public market में था या private markets में था. They've lost a lot of money, which is why funding is there, but it's just being not deployed that actively जिस तरह से हो रहा था. और पैसा market से उस तरह से evaporate नहीं होता. If you talk about capital markets, पैसा उस तरह से evaporate नहीं होता, पैसे की allocation different हो जाती है. पैसा secured securities में उसमें चला जाएगा, debt की तरफ चला जाएगा,
safe investments पे चला जाता है पैसा.
Exactly. और जहाँ पे EVC ecosystem में आएगा वहाँ पे the pricing is going to change. तो जो valuations हम देख रहे थे कि startup ने कुछ किया नहीं है, खाली एक application बनाई है और उनको $50 million की valuation मिल गई, that is getting a big check now. क्या valuation की बात करनी है, हाँ एक बबल बन गया था, that had to burst sooner or later, वो होना था. Valuations were going crazy. पाकिस्तान में भी the burn was going crazy. Startups were burning money like crazy. अब वो यूनिट इकोनॉमिक्स के बारे में भी सोच रहे हैं, और सारे everyone's working on it, because the idea of a startup is how it's different from a normal business is that initially you're going to burn money to get scale, to get to a point कि आपका business इस scale पर आ जाएगा eventually, that your business model start going to making money now, and you're going to come to a sustainable point. For a lot of companies, a lot of business models, लोग उसके बारे में सोच नहीं रहे थे. They were just going after growth. When you're going after crazy growth and you're burning a lot of money, और वो फिर एक point के बाद जाके वो justify नहीं करता, because you're burning $4 million every month, but you're just making $500,000 in revenue. तो आप negative $3.5 million पे जा रहे हैं, 3.5 million से आपका जल रहा है महीने. That's not sustainable, right? Your funding, the minute your funding stops, or the minute the funding dries up, you're done. तो आपने उसको sustainability की तरफ लेके जाना है, and that's what everyone's working towards now. That's basically ये shift आया, major shift जो है उसी चीजों का है कि pricing is going to be more same. The business model needs to make more sense. The unit economics need to make much more sense now, and all of us are working towards it, towards that. The VCs are looking into that as well. So that had to happen, और ये अच्छी चीज हुई है. It's a positive outcome. We'll actually see many more sustainable businesses जो लंबा अरसा चलेंगे, जो proper value create करेंगे happening, and the VC money is going to keep on flowing in. Of course, it's going to slow down for now, for the time being, लेकिन things the market's going to rectify it. उसकी सबसे बड़ा जो change आएगा उसकी pricing में आएगा, लेकिन the money start going to come in again. लेकिन हमारे केस में थोड़ा सा different ये होता है, जो macro economic और political stability खराब हुई है, that needs to be stable again for the investor to sort of have that confidence too. So over the next 5 years, I think पाकिस्तान के मार्केट बहुत बढ़िया थे. It's way too much. अगर मैं अभी मेरे पास हूँ तो मेरे पास 5-10 आइडियाज तो मेरे पास हैं जो बहुत बड़े प्रॉब्लम सॉल्वर्स हैं जिन पे काम किया जा सकता है, राइट? सो मार्केट इज देयर, इट्स गोना जस्ट कीप ऑन ग्रोइंग. Or over the next 5 years, I personally do see a lot of VC investment and really good startups coming up.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like market का एक अपना तरीका भी होता है. Like, okay, this is happening, but I think this is also part of the process के market सारों को इस पूरे process से लेके गुजर रही है, and later on, whatever is best gonna whoever survives this crunch is gonna come out with like better ideas and better investment and better opportunities. Great. We're almost at the 55 minute mark, so thank you so much, Sher. For being with us. और मुझे पता है कि मैंने बार इसको reschedule किया था. But I really wanted to cover your story because you're one of the few people I know मेरे batch से who has been this far. So why not? But great. Any last closing comments by you for anyone who's watching, who's trying to raise money, who's trying to start something of their own and thinking about quitting their jobs? कोई last closing comments आपके होंगे, and then we'll be done this.
I'm no expert in raising money, to be very frank. काफी बेहतर लोग मेरे से बैठे हैं, लेकिन one thing that I can talk about is कि starting your own company, चाहे वो startup हो या कोई traditional business हो, it's a lifestyle. It's not something easy. खबरें छप जाती हैं, अच्छा लगता है सबको वो spotlight में आना, लेकिन उसके पीछे the amount of effort that's going in, that's crazy. So just be ready for that. Whenever you're thinking of this, it's not easy, or it's not as sexy as it looks on the papers or on social media. There are going to be a lot of sleepless nights. It's a roller coaster basically. वो emotional roller coaster भी है, वो physical exertion की roller coaster भी है. लेकिन it's fun. You get to learn a lot. और दूसरी चीज़ है persistence. If you believe in the idea, if you really, so don't fall in love with the product. Fall in love with the problem that you're solving. Product pivot करेगा, product change करता है, product improve करता है. Be open to those ideas. Again, if you love the problem that you're solving, so you're always going to come up with good ideas. So persistence के साथ उस problem को solve करते रहें. Eventually things do fall in place. The right people are going to join you. When your team, right investors are going to join you, and eventually things will work out. And of course, मैं religious context में तो नहीं बात कर रहा, लेकिन नेक नियति से और अच्छा काम करें तो things do eventually work out.
That's great. Thank you so much, Sher. Thank you for giving this your time. Or I hope people watching would benefit out of this conversation. And yeah, it was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shariah, for having me.
No worries. That's it.